Hello everyone. I, Ashrita Shukla, on behalf of Jagran Institute of Management and Mass Communication, Kanpur, invite you all for the interactive session on the topic Reverse Migration and Opportunity in Crisis. 2020 started just like any other year with lots of hope and promises. On the contrary, we have witnessed one of the worst pandemic in modern history, bringing the entire world to a halt. Things doesn't stop here. When we were preparing ourselves to live in a constrained environment, one segment of our society in particular ignored all such cautions and began to move. Yes, I'm talking about our workers, the key contributors of urban development. With factories and workplaces shut down due to lockdown imposed in the country, billions of migrant workers had to face hardship like loss of income, food shortages, uncertainty about their future. With no work, no money, thousands of migrant workers were seen walking hundreds of kilometers to go back to their native village. One of the worker, Kumar, worked at a textile factory earning rupees 10,000 per month, had been living in Ludhiana for the past 12 years. He says he will never come back. No matter what, he has seen the worst in his life. I do not own anything in my village, but even the farmland, but I will not feed and I'll not come back to this city. There are thousands of migrant laborers like Kumar who have been forced to take this unprecedented journey. दो लाइनें कहना चाहूंगी, जहां गुजर है वहां बसर नहीं होता, जहां गुजर है वहां बसर नहीं होता, हमारा सफर आसान नहीं होता। हमारा पता क्या पूछते हो साहेब, हम मजदूर हैं, हम मजदूर हैं और मजदूरों का कोई घर नहीं होता। जैसे कि सिक्के के दो पहलू होते हैं, दूसरा पहलू है संभावनाएं, अपॉर्चुनिटीज। With this come opportunities. Large scale reverse migration has opened up a Pandora box of how we view the role of laborers in India's growth trajectory. Our speaker will be discussing on this today. Before taking much of your time, I would now request our student, Yash Tiwari, to please moderate a session starting with a brief introduction of a speaker. Over to you, Yash.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Respected teachers, my dear guest, and my dear fellow students, a very warm and delightful welcome to all of you for joining us in this webinar on the topic of reverse migration and opportunity in disguise. Right now, as we all are caught amidst the pandemic, the most major issue that we can possibly think of, a much talked about concern for all of us in the society is that of reverse migration. Today, I, Yash Tiwari, am going to be your moderator for this session. And to enlighten us all with his words of wisdom and share some of his knowledge with us based on the topic that we have for concern today, we have amongst us Mr. Pavas Mishra. Mr. Pavash Mishra is the head of the new initiative at LaborsNet. He is a researcher and strategist. He is also an alumnus of the renowned institute in colleges like IIT Kanpur and IIM Lucknow. Mr. Pavas has been the head of research at Red Seed Consulting. He has co-founded the Fluid Access startup, worked at the top lines of Reliance Broadcast Network, heading the media sales, and has been a keen, passionate person for guiding and mentoring others. Sir, it is truly an honor to have you amongst us today. Now, I would like to welcome you to take the stage because the stage is all yours. Or should I say, our screens are all yours.
Uh, Thank you, Yash. Thanks, Ashrita. Uh, Thank you, everybody, for participating in this. Okay, so let's start. As of now, in my current role, I'm also this topic is very close to my heart because as of now, in my current role, also we are. I am heading the line of business which engages into the construction workers and trying to get more jobs for the workers in the construction domain. And if you look at it, migrant workers form almost 40% of migrant workers are engaged in construction domain. So, and which is the worst impacted domain if you look at it. So this is quite a relevant and interesting topic for me. We have been, I've been working on this for last 1 year or so, and in the recent time since the COVID lockdown started, uh, as a company, we took a very quick action for the first stage of COVID recovery, which was that we started providing the essential goods and kits to the uh, community wherever there were migrant workers stranded. We just reached out to them. We have till date, in fact, we have almost benefited 5 lakh, more than 5 lakh people by providing them food, sanitization, and essential kits. Now comes the second stage of recovery. We are entering into the second stage of COVID fight, which is economic recovery. And as the lockdowns are getting opened, relaxed a little bit, uh, we would like to see what to make of it. So first of all, let me clarify one of the things. See, while the topic says opportunity in the crisis, reverse migration and opportunity in the crisis, we are nowhere saying that COVID itself was not bad or the lockdown was not bad. It was, in fact, it is one of the worst thing which could have happened to the migrant worker community. But what we are, the way from where we are starting this journey now is saying that, okay, well, this has happened. What has happened? It's a sunk cost fallacy. Now, the sunk cost has happened. COVID is the new normal. This is the way things are going to be. Reverse migration has happened, and it's happened at scale, and it is going to happen further at scale. Now, from this point onwards, what are the opportunities there? Is there anything good which can come out of it? Is there anything which we can leverage and work out? So with that context, let's start with the presentation. Let me just share the presentation a bit. Okay. Okay, I hope my screen is visible. So if you look at it, India has always had a huge migrant population. Just to put things in numbers, as per census 2011, the way census defines migration, it is like 450 million people who are all migrant, but that includes everybody like me also. This number had increased at the rate of 45% over the last census, which was 2001, where there were around 300 million migrant people. But this is not the true number. It involves everybody who has permanently shifted. A large portion of this 450 million was the reason for migration was women moving after marriage. So the way this migration was defined, I think the better way to look at it is around the 20 million number of people who migrated for work and business. And this was census 2011. We are sitting in 2020, so I am hoping this number would have very well increased to almost a 30 million number. Out of this 30 million number, the data, as per the last census, there was a huge 60% plus of number, which was an intra-district migration. So, which is up to a nearby location. Apart from that, there was almost a 40% number, which was inter-districts and interstate migration, which is a more serious form of migration. So if you look at it, if we say there are 30 million workers, and I am sure this 30 million number is also understated, and this is all internal migrants, who are moving from within the Indian states. I would say the actual number would be much higher. The second set of migrant workers are from the external migrant domain. Now, this external migrant, most of them have almost 20% plus have moved to UAE, another 12% to Saudi, then Kuwait, then Oman, then Qatar. If you look at it, this number itself adds up to almost 35 to 40%. And many of them have again gone for construction purpose. Then a huge number has moved to the US domain. So the actual number of the construction worker, it says around 40% of them are construction workers. So we can very well keep it that around 12 million people would be 12 to 15, anywhere between 12 to 15 million people as internal migrant would be construction worker. You may add another 5-6 million to who are the external migrants who have moved to Middle East region, have come back, who have now come back. A lot of them have now come back. To further put things into perspective as a new data, okay, let me talk about the reverse migrant problem a little later. Now the migrant population, this was the worst hit. If you look at it, CMI did a study. CMI did a study which says that India's unemployment rate rose from around 6.5% to 23% plus during the period of lockdown itself. Now, what would happen? Most of them would be the migrant workers. Why? Because most of the migrant workers are daily wage earners or gig workers. So gig workers are the workers who work as per the outcome rate on a piece rate manner. So daily wager is a person who gets a wage daily. Gig worker would get it, like for example, if you take a Swiggy's delivery boy, that person is a gig worker because he gets paid, most often he gets paid on the number of deliveries done by him, not by number of days he has worked. So gig workers and daily wage earners form a massive portion of the migrant workers, and these were the first ones who got hit. Now, so you can very well assume this extra unemployment rate which rose during the COVID lockdown scenario, a good number of them would be migrant workers. They were the worst hit during this scenario. Second, what would happen is once they got unemployed and the lower income group, they would not have money. They did not have a lot of money to sustain because they had migrated from a low cost of living source location to a high cost of living destination location. So for example, a person from a Begusarai in Bihar would have moved to Bangalore. Now in a Bangalore, the cost of living is very high. Till the time they are earning, it's fine. But and some of the costs are even taken over. Like for example, an afternoon meal is taken care of by the employers in certain cases. Now in this case, their cost of living suddenly increased because now all the costs they have to take care of, and they were not earning. So the bandwidth which they had to live peacefully or to live in a dignified manner was very, very small. Some of the studies even showed that the construction workers and the migrant workers did not even have money for a week to survive. They didn't have a ration to survive for a week also. So that is this, because they have sent most of their savings back to their hometown also. So that is also another angle which had added that unemployment was so bad for the migrant workers specifically. Now, and the third thing is there is a high uncertainty about the work scenarios because the employers themselves are now hit economically. Now, when the employers are hit, there's a huge uncertainty. The migrant workers are the last people whom the employers would want back because they would first give preference to the payroll workers. So once again, there is a huge uncertainty whether they'll get back to work or not. When for example, the other uncertainty was regarding the COVID guidelines. So for example, now because of social distancing, when the construction companies or the construction sites would start, they are hesitating to start. So I have had discussions with a number of construction companies now. Government has given a 6 months to 1 year timeline where they can extend their projects. And on the other hand, certain state governments have asked them to have the workers on site if they want to have. So if they want to have, so it's like more like an on-site quarantine type of thing. Now, if there is an on-site quarantine and the construction projects are in a finishing stage, they have limited space or limited number of workers they can afford on the site. So a lot of other workers they have to let go. So so many of them are only choosing very essential works to start, and they are slowing down their reopening of the businesses. So many of the businesses are not, if you look at it, while the government guidelines say many of them can open, this traction is coming very slowly. And because of this slow rate of traction which is now coming, it will be difficult for a migrant worker to predict when he is going to get back on job again. So I'll come to those specific problems later on, but understand at this point that this unemployment rate which has risen, good amount of that is contributed by the migrant workers, and migrant workers did not have a bandwidth or a runway savings runway to sustain for some time. And third, there is an ambiguity in the work. This is what really triggered the migration. Another example I'll give you, I was talking to certain construction workers, the bigger real estate players. The moment this COVID scenario hit, they started, they came up with packages, they came up with the support money, and they gave to their subcontractors and micro contractors to further benefit the workers so that the workers can sustain for some time. But their major complaint was there was zero trackability of that money and the support ration which they provided to their micro contractors. Many of the micro contractors did not even provide that to the workers. So the workers again were left very much stranded, if I would say. Again, I was talking to some of the workers and the employers who had discussions with the workers directly. They are now hating their micro contractors, saying that we'll die but we'll not work and come back and work with these contractors. So in this scenario, look at it in this way. And then there was, although there was a lot of the civil societies came and a lot of philanthropic organizations, NGOs, some organizations like ours, we started providing a lot of support to them. But look at it, how long there's a certain thing which is a dignity of work, which is also there, which they did not. So they felt undignified when they have to stand in lines for food. They have to get a photograph clicked by the donor, and that also again creates another issue for them. So there were 3-4 issues because of which reverse migration got triggered. Once it got triggered, it just went on and on and on. So I think this is the scenario in which the reverse migration started to happen. Now, what has happened due to this reverse migration? It's a sad reality, but what has happened to them? This is now reverse migration is going to alter the workforce supply map of India. If you look at it, these were the states. I'm sure you might be able to look at the map. There are states which were net positive in terms of net migration. Like for example, Karnataka was a positive, Maharashtra was a net positive, Gujarat was a positive, Delhi, even Haryana was a net positive in terms of migration rates. On the other hand, Rajasthan, UP, Bihar, Odisha, West Bengal, entire eastern belt. In India, it would be the west and the south, which were the destination locations of migration. And the eastern belt and the northeastern belt, and then northern UP and Rajasthan, if you add to it, and even Himachal Pradesh to an extent, these were the belts from where a lot of migration happened. So they were net negative in terms of migration. If you look at it even closely, Kerala would have had a net negative in migration because migration happened to Middle Eastern countries. Gujarat had a lot of migration, but Gujarat also had a positive migration because of Ahmedabad, Rajkot, Vadodara, Surat type of cities. But a lot of migration also happened from Gujarat to UK, Canada. Punjab had a major outflow to Canada. Now, Gujarat had a major outflow to UK and US. So similarly, there were states which had external migration also. But India is very clearly divided into the net positive and the net migration, net negative. Out of the net positive states also, there were specific cities, the metros and the few ones, where the migration would happen. Like for example, the entire net positivity of Haryana comes because of Faridabad and Gurgaon. Faridabad, Gurgaon, maybe you can add Manesar and Bhiwani. Net positivity of Maharashtra comes from Mumbai and Pune. Net positivity of Karnataka comes from Hubli and Bangalore, mostly because of Bangalore and slightly because of Hubli. Hyderabad is another out of our entire Andhra Pradesh, Telangana region. Hyderabad is the only place where net positive migration would be happening. So, so there were very few cities which were the destinations of migration. Right? I'm talking mostly about the interstate migration now. But there were entire states, Jharkhand, Bihar, and UP, Odisha, most of the northeastern states, West Bengal, Andhra to a good extent, Andhra itself. Now, these were the states, the entire states were there. So the source destinations were spread across the country. Migrant destination were specific cities. So because of which the country has been divided into two major parts. Other set of destination locations where there are the road transport which is happening. So wherever there are highway locations and highways, and metro construction works are happening. There again, some migration destinations were created because of the construction work happening. So these were the few destination locations. So India was clearly divided into two parts. One was the destination location, one was the source location. Now, this supply map is going to get altered. This is going to change now, and the reverse thing will happen. The new terms which would come now is the earlier pre-COVID source locations will become workforce surplus locations, because the workforce has moved back, but the work has not been created in this short period of time. On the other hand, the earlier migration destination location due to reverse migration will now become workforce deficient location, as after the lockdown the economic recovery catches up. Because why this will happen? Because the people who have gone back, they will not, and all of them at least will not return to the destination locations till the time they have more confidence and the volatility and ambiguity in the job market goes down. Second, there is a cost also. So there is a cost of coming back. And third, if they get settled during this period in their hometown, the cost of living is very low. And because of which the sense of survival is much higher now in the smaller cities, in smaller towns, they will tend to stick. So there are studies which say that almost 13 to 15% will definitely going to stay. And we are expecting this number to be higher unless we do something about it. So the scenario is there will be two types of location, which are the workforce surplus location and the workforce deficient location. Now, and we are expecting this settlement to happen, or normalcy to get established at least in 1 to 2 years. It will not happen overnight. Reverse migration has happened suddenly. Remigration, if I can give a term to it, remigration will take a lot of time. It is not easy because it is associated with the sentiments and the livelihood which can be provided to them. Now, both of these scenarios and both of these type of locations will have their own set of opportunities and challenges. So I'll talk about both. So look at the workforce surplus locations. What will happen to the workforce surplus locations? What is the opportunity out there? The biggest opportunity is now there is it's not just in the terms numbers. The opportunity is not in terms of the number of manpower which is there, or my person power it is there. It is the trained personnel which is available there. So for example, imagine a Flipkart who wants to expand in these locations, in the Bihar region or the West Bengal region. So for example, we know that Flipkart and certain organizations like Flipkart, BigBasket, they are these new age companies are, a lot of them are trying to tap the next $500 million. They call it the next $500 million market. Now they are trying to, these new age services are trying to target the larger masses. Now these larger masses, earlier when you have to do that, Flipkart has to set up an entire logistics setup out there in Bihar, in Bihar, which is apart from Patna. So you have to do it in Samastipur, you have to do it in Begusarai, in Kanpur. Kanpur still fine, but you'll have to do it in Unnao. So if they really want to set up the entire logistics team, they will have to either use a lot of time to skill and train, and it's a on-job. A lot of it is on-job training component. So you have to train them before they can be deployed, and they can get a full productivity out there. But now, out of the people who have reverse migrated from a Bangalore or a Delhi, now these people, some of these people are already trained. They can take the supervisory roles in those startups. Now this is where the new opportunities are. So a workforce surplus location will have an opportunity of having the trained manpower at no cost now. So this is one big advantage. Second is what will happen is, because the larger organizations, if the larger organizations are willing to aggregate this workforce. See, this workforce was never tracked. This workforce have not been tracked. Nobody knows how much of this trained workforce is there. Because of now the reverse migration has happened, and a lot of political pressure also which is there, a lot of statutory pressure which are there. People have started, and especially the governments have started to track who these people are, what are their skill profiles. So NSDC is also tying up with an AI company who want to actually track what are the skills of the people who have come back. What can they do? Where can they place them? So what will happen is now these people start getting tracked, and maybe some of the, if a larger business tries to take an opportunity and do it and want to set up this organization, there will be a lot of ancillary mid to small businesses which will aggregate these surplus workforce. So there is a lot of effort which is going on into aggregating these workforce, where they are, what they can do, and a lot of scope of small to mid-size workforce contractors. This opportunity is coming so that they can aggregate them and then supply them to the larger businesses. Larger businesses would not, it will take a lot of effort for them to go out and seek them, because they need in masses. So there is an opportunity for the mid to small scale businesses also to get associated with the new opportunities and then supply the workforce. So, but for that, they have to aggregate the workforce. If there are any skill gaps, they have to quickly fill them up and supply them. And they have to be smart enough to identify which type of large businesses are going to come in. And then obviously the workers, what is the advantage opportunity for the workers? The workers who have gone there might have a slightly lower income for themselves, but on the other hand, their real income is going to increase. So how do we define the real income? Let's say you are based out of Kanpur, your cost of living is 10,000 rupees a month, and you are earning in Kanpur, let's say 15,000 rupees. So your real income is actually 5,000 rupees. The moment you go to a Bangalore, your cost of living goes up by 10,000 rupees. You are going to spend 25,000, and your earning goes up, becomes double by to 30,000 rupees. But your real income remains same. You are still earning 5,000 there and saving 5,000. So for a worker who is going back from a Bangalore or a Mumbai to live in his village or a small town, and who already have a livelihood set up there, they have their own house, maybe a farming land also, their real income might actually increase if these large businesses chain starts moving. So it has to, this opportunity is there, the workforce, the trained workforce is there, but it has to be tapped. If this workforce gets tapped from the top, there is a whole chain of economic events which will start working, and many of them workers will actually be more productive by living there. I'll come to the challenge. What is the biggest challenge in doing this? The biggest challenge in doing this is, how do you match a worker to the work? So this matching part is the most difficult thing which is going to happen, because remember what I said in the beginning, the destination locations were limited. There was a Bombay in a Maharashtra, Pune in a Maharashtra, Bangalore in a Karnataka. But the source location for these are like small towns, small cities. They are all spread out. Because of Corona situation, the other social distancing norms and other things, like for example, you take a labor market itself, a construction works labor market. Open labor markets are not there. It will be difficult for, like, people were standing on the side of the roads, and people were the contractors were coming and picking them up. That is going to take some time to happen, or will not happen in those high numbers. So how do you know where these workers are, who these workers are? Many of them might not have the phone, smartphone at least. They will have a button phone. So it is important that we start tracking them right now. If we know who they are and where they are, it will be easier for us to provide them with work. So this is the challenges and the opportunities of the surplus workforce, surplus locations. Now, what about the Bangalores and the Mumbais of the world, the workforce deficient location? As the work restart, they are going to face major issues. The first major issues is companies are going to expecting anyways low demand. So because on the spur buying or a rapid buying or non-thinking buying is going down. They're not going to think much. People are not doing quick buying. They are not spending into luxuries now. They will take some time. People because that entire economic scenario has changed. There are job cuts. There are cuts in the pay, salary cuts which people have taken, and there is again an ambiguity in the situation. Many of the organizations are shutting down. So it has trickled down to the end consumers. So there are people like us who will now control their consumption and the consumption behavior. So they are definitely, many of the companies are going to definitely face a low demand scenario, because of which they will have to right size their workforce. If they had a workforce which has already reverse migrated, they might live with it. If they still have a higher workforce which are native workers, they might want, there will be a scene where people will start cutting down jobs. And I think we have, in the past few weeks, we have seen a lot of this happening. The other thing is companies expecting high or regular demand. So there are two types of companies in a workforce deficient location. One is, one are the companies which are definitely got hurt. Like for example, an OYO or a hotel chain, entire hospitality industry, it has got hit. Out of which, where there are smaller companies, the mid to small size companies, they are worst hit because they did not have the runway to live with that. Bigger ones, bigger hotel chains may be surviving. Similarly, on the other hand, there are a lot of companies like a Big Basket or a Flipkart or an Amazon, which will be facing a higher or regular demand because people are willing and wishing that things come to them. So an online ordering, for example, has increased. Now, healthcare, for example, entire healthcare has increased. Now, pharmacies are going to increase, get more business. Your hospitals, etc., clinics are also getting more business. Your diagnostic chains are going to see a higher business. Telemedicine, for example, will come in very strongly now. So these are the few sectors which are going to face higher or regular demand now. And many of the FMCG companies are going to face a similar regular demand. Their demand has taken a slight hit. Now they're going to get back on it. And their hit was more around the retails and the essential retails, grocery retails, and the FMCG companies had more hit because of the, not just because they were, there was a demand issue, there was a supply issue which was there, or there was a compliance issues which were there, because of which they faced lower turnover in this period. But their demands are very quickly going to go back to normal. But the workforce is not there. The migrant workforce has gone. They've gone for a reverse migration. Now, because of this, what will happen is they don't know actually from where to get this workforce back. Their cost of workforce is also going to get higher, because they will now have to focus on retaining the existing workforce, because that is a skilled workforce which have been trained. Otherwise, something like a construction will want to delay the work, their project plans. That is again going to go for a loss. That is going to result in certain amount of loss because their financials are going to get. Similarly, there are a lot of these. The other challenge which the workforce deficit locations are going to face is, how do you manage the new work processes? Because of COVID, a lot of new work processes have come. Like for example, in construction specifically, we have ourselves come up with a set of like 200 activities which are necessary to manage the work on a construction site, because the nature of the work on the construction site has never been in which can incorporate a social distancing or a safe and hygienic work. So it is quite difficult to do that there. So we have come up with those. It is not just that you will just put a sanitizer out there or draw circles at the entry gate and the work will be done. Your COVID related activities will have to be incorporated into every SOP that you have. Now, so there are like 200 odd activities. Now we are coming up with a mobile app which can track and help with the site inspection now on a construction site. So this is going to require a severe challenge in terms of changing the SOPs, changing the workflows which are there, and then again reskilling their entire workforce on these COVID-related activities. And this is not just COVID; it is now reskilling them on the day-to-day work, the way they were doing the work. So it is again going to be second set of challenges. Mobility restrictions are going to be difficult. Earlier, a lot of people, for example, in Bangalore, used to come from Tamil Nadu from the Hosur side. They were traveling almost on a daily or a weekly basis at least. Now, this is going to be difficult. Anybody coming from Tamil Nadu will have to be a 14 days quarantine. I was talking to railways, for example. There's a major challenge. They have a very specific track linkage workforce, which is a very skilled workforce. You don't find them easily anywhere. Now they only come from Tamil Nadu, and you don't have time to actually change or train the new workforce. It will take a lot of time. Now, if a 14 days quarantine happen, it is going to be a challenge. So workforce deficit location are going to face a lot of labor supply related issues. So for them, it is going to be a major challenge. But what will happen as an opportunity? Now, I am saying it is not just an opportunity for it is an opportunity for the economy and everybody. One is because there is a shortage of labor. Good amount of focus is now going to happen on retaining the existing workers, retaining the migrant workers, stopping the migrant workers, and to an extent luring the reverse migrant worker to remigrate and come back, which essentially means that there was a Migrant Workforce Act 1979, which was not so strongly managed, or compliance was not there. But now that has new protocols are going to be added to that act. Probably might not come like an act or so, but the companies, that the employers at their end, are going to start following certain protocols. So because of which there is a renewed focus on the worker benefits. Once that worker benefits, the focus on worker benefits happen, it is going to stay. You cannot give something to the workers and tomorrow take again, right? So we are expecting worker benefits to improve. This is a forced situation, but in the midterm, it is really going to benefit the workers a lot. Second, obviously, if a 15 to 20% workforce is not going to come back to you, what will you do? You will try to become operational. You try to improve operation efficiency. So if you try to improve your efficiency, so where you needed 12 people, you will try and do it in 10 people or 8 people. To do that, the entire relooking, and anyways, you have to relook into your COVID-related practices, workplace practices. So since you have to relook into the practices, you will have to redefine. You are already redefining your processes, systems. You will invest in certain things. There is a lot of operational efficiencies there which is going to come. You can take an example. For example, for this typical, what I'm doing today on webinar, by just spending a couple of hours of my time, I would have ideally been asked to travel and spend a whole day, and I would have traveled there for a 1 hour to 2 hour workshop and come back here. So for example, Zoom meetings or video conferencing has increased. All my sales meetings today for last 2 months are happening all on the video. Everybody has accepted that as a normal. So this is a very small example of operational efficiency. There are a lot more operational efficiency even in the manufacturing and the construction sectors which are going to happen. Some investment into technology and machinery is going to happen. For example, earlier there were too many supervisors on a site. Now we are asking them to adopt certain mobile app for doing site inspections. So then nobody has to actually prepare a report and submit it to anyone. Automatically, they'll create the evidences and the report gets published, and the whole workflow gets affected by that. Once this happens for my COVID safety site inspection, this is going to expand its scope to every construction site related workplace act practice. Now, this is going to reduce the cost and the time. Initially, there will be some cost to adopt that technology. Initially, there will be some cost to reskill their workforce to use that technology. But later on, this is going to reduce the cost of projects. So that is again going to positively impact the companies also. Third is, because of this operational efficiencies, companies have been historically known to be secretive with their systems and the works. Now they are forced to collaborate. For example, one of the examples you can take, a Big Basket, when they did not have enough number of delivery boys, and Uber on the other hand, nobody was traveling with the drivers, they collaborated. So Big Basket started using Uber's drivers and their cars and started delivering their grocery. So such type of collaborations have never been seen in the system. The habit and the culture of this collaboration, the benefits of this collaboration, once tasted by the Indian industry, they are going to retain. They will remain and people will start using them. So these are the some of the challenges and the opportunities of these. I'll take it up one by one, and I'll quickly run through if there are any interesting points which are there. Like for example, for a workforce surplus location, what is needed now? Three main things are challenges. There is a lack of information. The biggest challenge is how to match the work with the workforce. So a good amount of effort has to be put into tracking the people and how do you maintain the continuous flow of the work. flow of information. So for example, we are also trying to work with various different partners on creating a large scale platforms where we are saying that how can we know where these surplus workforces are. So there are a lot of NGOs who are working with them. So for example, I'm assuming around 10 lakh people have returned to Jharkhand, or including people they are expecting and they're booked for returning. Similar situation is there in multiple states. Now we know of a few organizations who are working with them. Now they can, these are NGOs and the philanthropic organization who want to give them work. Now we are creating a platform. There are a lot of construction companies, lot of highway construction sites, lot of small gram panchayats where small works are there. We are trying to get them also onboarded. Now, once you have a platform, and we are also negotiating with certain large-scale employers about some terms and condition of their contract, so that workers can be provided some benefits, some incentive to return, maybe some reimbursement of the cost of returning, of the travel costs, etc. Maybe some amount of. So this is all under discussion, that how can we create that list of employee benefits, and so that they can return back to work. So remigration is one part. Maybe in the local also there are construction sites which the worker doesn't know. So if in Patna there is an opportunity and the person in Samastipur or Begusara is there, he can go there and start working. So he doesn't actually have to, might have to come back to Bangalore. So such type of opportunities using technology, there is an opportunity to create that platform where the workers and the work can be connected. And there can be intermediaries in between, like these NGOs and the philanthropic organization, who can also come on board, and then they can aggregate the workforce and put them on the platform, and then ensure that they get regular work. Second challenge which is going to be there, obviously, is the restricted movement, and the third is the closed labor market. So this is something which is going to be there. More knowledge and communication about these movement, and some of these which can be taken care of, some of the permissions, etc., which if they can be taken care of by the employers themselves after collaborating with the government bodies and statutory bodies, I think that is the only solution which can work. So this is what will happen in the workforce surplus location. Now let's see what will happen in the workforce deficit location. Three action items are there. First is they have to the companies have to focus on retention and rebuilding the workers' confidence. So retention, we are already talking about there are financial benefits which you're talking about. There are physical well-being benefits which have to be there. So for example, we are saying we'll create the COVID safe construction sites. For a safe site, what can we do? We can have an on-site healthcare. So, so can we put a small telemedicine unit for which any worker who does not have, who have a small ailment, a medical ailment, does not actually have to go out of the site. Otherwise, if he goes to a clinic and or a hospital, there is a good chance that he will catch the virus infection and come back and infect few more people. So we're saying we will give an online on-site healthcare facility. So that is what we are proposing to the builders, that you start putting that. There's a small cost to it. Everybody has to be certified and trained on COVID processes. We are saying all vehicles which are going inside and outside a construction site have to be disinfected. Similar things can happen on a manufacturing site. Similar things can happen in offices. So what we're saying is, for each workplace, there has to be certain health protocol for well-being, physical well-being protocol. So that is the second thing. So first is the financial well-being, whatever they can do, where if we can negotiate with the employers and the government and the philanthropic organization, they can come together. If there is a possibility, we can give more confidence, financial confidence to the workers. That's one retention, which will help in retention and rebuilding the confidence. The second thing which will happen is that can we talk about a physical well-being or health care of the workers. The third is, can we also talk about the mental well-being, of the mental and emotional well-being of the workers. So we are tying up with certain organizations which can provide telemedicine or teleconsultation. It will be simple helpline numbers where the workers can call, they can get into some support, they can connect them to the right people. They can also talk about generally if they are feeling pain. Because one of the things, other things which we have realized, and a lot of the workers have come out, and some of the research organizations have come out, are that many of the migrant workers who are still stranded in the destination, in the earlier, in a Bangalore or a Mumbai, they are still their immediate need is that maybe if we can talk to the employers, they can allow them for a week to go back and ensure that once they come back, they'll get on the site. They just want to get out of this situation. So maybe we can connect them to their hometown. Somebody else can talk about them, tell them the scenario, what is there. So there is a emotional and mental well-being aspect to it. So retention and rebuilding worker confidence is not a one thing. It has got multiple angles to it, and many different type of organizations have to come together to ensure that this works. The second part is the tackling of the mobility restrictions. Now employers have to rethink. Earlier, employers would not really care about from where the workers are coming. On a daily basis, also, they do not care about where the people live. In Bangalore, people live like 20 kilometers away, and they go back to work. Now, many of starting from the lockdown, many of the smart SMEs and organizations had started to provide on-site stay. Some of the work or discussions that we are having now is, can we provide near the workplace stay? Can we create a hostel system, a hired hostel system, or a OYO of worker stay? So these type of solutions are also something we should trying to discuss, so that the mobility restrictions are reduced. They have to continuously communicate to the workers how the mobility restrictions are going to get lifted, what is the impact on it. They also have to provide them place of stay which is near the site. They also need to provide them, if at all they are not able to provide them a workplace, a place of stay which is near the workplace, they can look at providing them transport, a company-driven transport which is hygienic, where the disinfection and the hygiene is taken care of. Because the more the workers use public transport, the more risk of COVID infection is going to be there. So mobility is going to be an important aspect now, which has never been so strongly emphasized in a employee-employer relationship. Now, the third is operational restructuring and strategic tie-ups. I've already talked about it, that a lot of this, their workplace practices have to be restructured. A lot of the social distancing and the hygiene restrictions have to be incorporated in the day-to-day processes, and some amount of their works have to be outsourced. Organizations have to collaborate also. So these are the few things which a workforce deficit location will involve. Right? So like I talked about, in terms of retention and rebuilding, there have to be healthcare measures, there have to be improved incentives. For example, Grofers during the lockdown gave all their on-ground staff essential goods at the end of the day, apart from whatever their regular pay was there. Second, whatever jobs can afford, there can be a flexible workplace policy. They can allow a work from home. They can allow for flexi timings. Like, for example, my company has traditionally been a vocational training company. We have almost always worked on center-based models or offline models. I used to travel myself 40 kilometers in a day. Now, even after the lockdown is over, nobody is asking me to come to office. Our offices, we have actually shut down a couple of offices which were not needed. We have actually saved some cost. And on the other hand, I have my flexible timings. I have my flexibility to work from my home. I'm actually saving at least 3 hours a day, of which a couple of hours I contribute to the office, another 1 hour I contribute to myself. This is a very good, which is an incentive, an unsaid incentive for myself. And obviously, the healthcare measures are there. We have already talked about that. Now, for mobility restrictions, so company arranged stay and food we talked about, company arranged transport we talked about. There are a lot of these employee transport firms which are there, which manage the pick and drop of employees. They're specialized into it. They can look at it from that perspective, so that they can further expand their business. So it was a win-win situation for both. From an operational restructuring perspective, there definitely has to be collaboration between the company. Hiring is one part, which is going to be strategic in nature now. Now the organizations who need workers suddenly have to look at the type of organization who are actually laying off employees. And now, can both the organizations tie up together and do outplacement for one? Look, for example, a Swiggy for some time back, or a Zomato, both of them, and I think a couple of more such organizations, they laid off a lot of employees now. Now, these were in thousands of numbers. Now, can the other, a Big Basket or or a Flipkart or an Amazon, they can very well tie up at the organization level that before laying off, they can actually do an outplacement agreement with them. So that directly those employees get interviews there and they can hire them. Similarly, the other thing which needs to happen is there's going to be a restructuring of organization structure. So some person, if I was supposed to do X task, I might need to do X plus Y task tomorrow. Or X might not exist in tomorrow's world, Y task will be existing. Now I have to be reskilled or upskilled for the new job roles. So the organizations need to actually strategically plan their upskilling and reskilling plan. Normally a skilling budget is the first thing, or an education budget is the first thing which gets hit in the time of crisis. But it has to be the other way around this time. They have to actually invest in education and skilling more so that they are able to survive. Some of their employees have to become multitaskers, and there is a good potential of doing that. Other thing is the organizations will now run more shifts. This is for sure which is going to happen. They will run more shifts now. So how can they look at increasing the productivity? Because of social distancing, less number of people will come in one shift. So they have to actually plan those shifts. They have to plan for those overhead expenses which are going to come because of the more number of shifts, which is even better than actually not going for low productivity. So these are some of the things. I'll just conclude this by summarizing what are the opportunities which we are seeing there. Number one, the country, because of this COVID pandemic and the reverse migration, what are the opportunities? Number one, there is going to be an even distribution of workforce. I mean, not absolutely even, but much more even than what it earlier was. This 15 to 20% workforce, skilled and more aspirational workforce, is going to stay back. And if they are going to stay back, if we are able to leverage them, if we are going to convert them into productivity, we are actually going to improve we are actually going to set up new businesses in the locations where there were less businesses. So Bihar or Jharkhand or UP can very well benefit from people who are staying back. Either they can treat them as a headache, or they can treat them as people who are staying back as assets. So assets and liability mindset has to change. The second is real income of the workforce is going to change. If that happens, if they are able to deploy the people, their actual income of the workforce is going to increase, their consumption is going to increase, and this is going to accelerate your economy. Third is technology in informal workforce. By the informal workforce has to increase, because now there are very less, the older contract and worker linkages are going to get broken. New linkages have to be built up, and there are no open labor markets as of now. So the only way, a good way to find more work is through adoption of technology. And if this adoption of technology happens, I think a lot of effort is going to be saved by the workforce. The fourth one, which is going to be there, workplace systems and practices are going to be more hygienic, much better, much evolved. So I think that is immediately going to be benefiting for everybody. Fifth is efficiency of the organizations is now going to increase. Last 2-3 months, so like we say, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So that is what is going to happen to the organization which are there. Their efficiency is going to increase. And finally, collaboration, the culture of collaboration between the organization is going to drastically improve. And whoever does not collaborate, now you don't have to do everything yourself. You don't have to, you have to start being more open, more transparent culture has to come and especially in the MSME sector. If that does not come, many of them are not going to survive itself. So if they have to survive, the culture of collaboration has to come for the organizations. And I think that is going to be the best thing which can happen to the economy as of now. So if information starts getting shared between people. For example, I'll tell you another example of that. In construction, again, we came up with certain healthcare solutions and disinfection solutions and training and COVID-related training solutions. Now, these solutions are, some of them are slightly expensive solutions, which cannot be afforded by small construction sites or small workers. Now, what we are going to do is we are talking to builder associations and industry bodies like CREDAI, NAREDCO, and we are talking to them and saying that, okay, why don't we collaborate 10 to 15 smaller builders and then start sharing solutions? So a nearby 5 sites can have a single healthcare telemedicine on-site center. So such collaborations are going to actually improve and effectively being effective for everybody, which is going to be there. I think thank you so far from my side. Any questions are there? Most welcome.
Hello. Thank you
Yeah,
so much, sir. That was truly a very enlightening session, I can surely say. However, the curious minds of our inquisitive viewers and our watchers do have a lot many questions that they would like to ask. So, if with your due permission, shall we proceed on to the Q&A session right now?
yeah. Yes. Please, please.
All right. So the first question comes from Dr. Asmita Dubey, who is the principal of Jagran Institute of Art, Science and Commerce. The question is somewhat like this. Contractualization of labours, which is a grave structural problem with respect to the employment in India, do you think that COVID-19 crisis and consequent labour issues have given any ray of hope to frame stringent regulations, private sector policy restructuring in this regards? If yes, then how would they be able to create social security for such huge chunks of population?
Okay. Yes, thank you for the question. It is a very relevant question. It is not just a ray of hope; it's a whole sun which is being given to this in this context. I think if you look at it, we are actually having discussions with some of the through some of our partners with some of the state governments, that how can we create better practices and workers? How can we create better protocols for the employers for their workers? So getting especially the migrant workers. So for remigration, now everybody understands that the buy-in is clear, that something has to be done. Now this can be done with the collaboration. It cannot be done by the employer alone. Otherwise, it's a huge cost for them. It cannot be done by the worker. The cost cannot be borne by the worker. It has to be borne through some government, some role of government, some role of philanthropic organizations, some role of the employers, and maybe some shared costs. So we are trying to bring different entities together and trying to work out on certain protocols which can be done, so that many of these reverse migrants can be remigrated. So, because what we understand is no matter how much you work out overnight, that economic recovery of the workforce surplus states cannot happen to the scale in which it has happened, right? So we are talking about millions of people who have already migrated or are willing to migrate. So this can only happen, and some part of it, they will have to be remigrated. In fact, a good part of it will have to be remigrated. Some will remain, which have to be absorbed. So work has to be done on two fronts. One front is where you will talk to the employers, work with the workers and the statutory authorities and some philanthropic organization to improve the benefits and get the remigration done. And the other end will be, how can we work with the states to identify the interested organizations who are willing to set up new units or willing to expand their operation. I think the service-based organizations who are targeting the mass consumers are the best suited for expanding this at this point of time. So we are hoping that we'll be able to make headway in the coming month. Yeah.
That is so great to know, sir. Thank you so much for answering that question. The next question comes from Rokesh Sukla, sir, from Jagran Institute of Management and Mass Communication. The question is somewhat like this. As we know that migrant laborers help in many basic development works in the states, but on the other hand, now they do not go to other states. Laborers of the same state will get more work than before. Local workers will benefit in Manrega and other government schemes. What is your opinion on this, sir?
Can you just repeat the question? I just didn't get the whole part of it.
Sure. As we know that migrant laborers help in many basic developmental works in the states, but on the other hand, now they do not go to other states. Laborers of the same state will get more work than before. Local workers will benefit in Manrega and other governmental schemes. What is your opinion on this?
See, yes, some part of it, yes, they will get work in the resident native states now, and which should be ideal. See, these are the states which need a lot of infrastructural development. But at the end of the day, somebody is going to pay for it, right? And it cannot happen for a long period of time that they keep on supporting them through simple Manrega. There has to be a productive outcome of that. So we are expecting some of the industries to expand and set up in those locations. So yes, the 20% or 15 to 20% workforce, which I said will stay there. And obviously, in short term, it will be larger number of workforce. Maybe in 3 months' time, we'll see many of this remigration to happen. Some of them will stay, and that part, whoever does not come back, that is a 30%, 20-30% of the workforce, let's say, stays back. That gap will be recovered through technology, through operational efficiencies, through improvement of practices. So I think it might be a win-win situation, provided we are able to give fruitful work to the workers in their native place. See, today, if you can give work in Kanpur or a Unnao or let's say a Begusarai, obviously the workers would want to stay. Nothing better than that if you are able to do it. But something will also come out of it. Some developmental work will also come out of that. So
yes. Yeah. Definitely. Thank you so much for answering that question, sir. The next question comes from Shubham Srivastav, who asks that according to JNU professor Santosh Mehrotra, reverse migration to village has set the economy back to 15 years. Sir, can we please have your views on this particular statement?
See, reverse migration definitely has gone. Remember the start of this presentation, what I said. A lockdown or a corona or a reverse migration has definitely not been good for the country as such. That is the first premises. Ideally, if it could have been avoided, it should have been avoided. But we are starting from the premise that it has happened. Now it's a reality. You can't live in a sunk cost fallacy saying that it will not happen. It has happened. Now, what do we do from now? From this point onwards, what are the way forward? So we have to pick up the economy from this place. How do we do that? That's what I said. The second phase is economic recovery. First phase was save the workers. Now saving part is done to an extent. Whatever we could do, we have done. The second part is economic recovery. How are we going to do economic recovery? How are we going to pick it from here? Yes, it has impacted. It has got negatively impacted. Any lockdown will have a negative impact. Forget about reverse migration. The challenge is how soon can you get them back? So that's on that front, efforts are being put up. Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. I'm sure the question has been answered. The next question comes from Reshma Rajni ma'am, who is an associate professor of Jagran Degree College. The question is somewhat like this. During the current migrant crisis, the laborers were deprived of even their fundamental rights. The corporate industries even initiated the process of degrading of labor laws by passing ordinances. In such a situation, how can you justify the reverse migration as an opportunity?
See, none of the things which happen to the migrant workers and because of which they have to reverse migrate and in the conditions in which they have to reverse migrate, I think those things are not being justified, obviously. Again, the same thing, reverse migration was bad. The way it happened was even worse. So I think there's no second thoughts about it. What we are talking about, I'm not justifying, there's no way to justify that actually. But to start with, what happens now, the best we can do about what we can do about it now is that the people who have already reverse migrated, now how can we pick them up? How can we connect them to work in a faster manner? How can we rebuild their confidence that, okay, the workplace can be safer places now? How can they either remigrate or they can come back or they can join the work confidently that they'll be safer? How can we renegotiate? And that is one of the most important part. Renegotiate with the governments, the policymakers, as well as with the employers, so that they can in a quicker way, they can start their sites, they can start their workplaces, they start their factories. That engine which has been forcefully shut down now has to be jump started. How can we jumpstart the whole economic recovery now? That is going to be the focus now, because without work, obviously the workers are of no use. They are going to suffer even more what they have already suffered. So from that point of onward, we have to just keep in mind, we have to learn from the reverse migration what has happened. We know that a lot of workers have been mistreated by some of their contractors or micro contractors, while there was certain support from the larger builders also in some cases. Now it's a learning that we can take from there, that how can we ensure that this first of all there is support, then this support reaches to the last mile, and then this support gets tracked. So we are coming up with certain technology solutions where we are trying to, now we know, let's see, the good thing, whatever way you can say, one thing which has happened due to this reverse migration is a tracking of the workforce. In a way, it is one step towards formalization. Now, once they get formalized, we are, can we continue this momentum? It is going to cost everybody. There is a certain cost associated with it. But if we are able to bear that cost, if we are able to fund that, can we keep tracking them, the informal workforce? Today, this is very difficult. There's no data available on the construction workforce, where there are, how many they are, what conditions they are. There is no data on how much a construction worker is earning, very little track of it. Can we can we learn from it? Can we start keeping a track of it now? And once we keep a track of their incomes, etc., a horde of benefits, financial benefits, non-financial benefits come with it. Can we, if we are able to track a worker for another one year, are we going to give them some financial benefits and incentives basis the amount of earning that they have? See, this data tracking is going to be a humongous task, but if done right, and this is the right moment, in my opinion, this is the best moment to start tracking the workers. If you start tracking the workers, if you start tracking what there are, what their benefits are, what their employment conditions are, and then you will be able to build policies on it. Then you will be able to build benefit structures on it. Then the philanthropic organizations like us can also come together to provide them further benefits. So we have to learn from the mistakes which have happened and build on it. For that, data is going to be an important aspect of it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, to conclude, even I would like to ask a question that has been there in my mind since the very beginning of this question. So with your due permission, shall I ask the question?
Please.
All right. So we know that a lot of relief fund has been collected for the COVID-19 relief and for the COVID-19 schemes that we have. However, according to you in particular, should the priority of allocation of this fund be towards the urban structure or the rural structure in our country?
Okay. Quite a difficult question like that, but look at it from this way. I would rather target a migrant worker is a migrant worker. It has to be a worker is a worker, rather, not a migrant worker. Workforce is a workforce. The rural and the urban structures do not matter at this point of time. See, under a normal developmental economics scenario, it would have been, I would have preferred doing a rural and urban divide and see where a lot of these workers can go, and then start the wheel of economy and turn the wheel of economy from the urban side, and got of people maybe have advocated for urbanization also to that extent. But in the current scenario, when the economy gets hit so badly, I think the immediate response is to give the direct money in the hands of the workers, whether they are in rural, whether they are in urban, according to the cost of living. I think the cost of living has to be one of the factors. According to the cost of living, money has to go, or benefits have to be provided in the hands of the worker directly. A direct consumption, because that is what is going to boost consumption. When you put money in the hands of the worker, he's going to spend it on his essentials. As of now, maybe savings are not the first priority. If you put and that is going to drive the supply side also, right? So if you give 100 rupees to a worker, he's going to spend it on food that start driving the whole economic system now. So urban and rural, in my opinion, right now is not a priority. I think maybe 6 months later we'll need to review what is the scenario, and then we start kicking off the urban-rural debate. As of now, I think wherever the workers are and whoever is there, as per the cost of livelihood, basic cost of livelihood has to provide it to everybody. And the second immediate, some amount of that relief fund has to go into connecting them to work so that it becomes self-sustainable. Otherwise, the model of support is never going to be scalable. So you have to start quickly generating jobs and connecting the workers to work. So one of the things which we have done in another thing which we are trying to do is we are saying that a lot of these livelihood opportunities are going to change, which were not there. The way we are seeing livelihood has to change. Like for example, there is a role which we have come up in rural area, which is called SHE, which is a sanitization and hygiene entrepreneur. So it's a women entrepreneur. We are trying to create a couple of them in each gram panchayat in Karnataka, and we are saying that can these women entrepreneurs start getting into the village, because vehicles are everywhere. Can they go to the nearest town and start disinfecting vehicles? And we are talking to the gram panchayats and saying, can you give these women work? So I think the pilots are starting in about 10 of the gram panchayats in Karnataka. If this works out, we're going to expand it to another 50,000. Now, if these things are going to happen, this is going to generate, this is a new role which has never existed. There is nothing called a hygiene entrepreneur. But now this sanitization and hygiene entrepreneur this role has been created now. Now, once this role has been created, we are going to create livelihood for 1 lakh women entrepreneurs now. So these are all in rural areas. So the focus of the relief funds, focus of the money has to go into generating direct livelihood for these entrepreneurs. Similarly, for electricians who are there in smaller cities, now we are trying to do some pilots in Gwalior, Jhansi, and Sagar area. We have a set of electrical contractors. We're trying out new models with them. Can they work on annual maintenance contracts with these consumers? Can we talk to the solar and some electrical appliances companies? And they can take up, we can create a network of electrical contractors, upskill them, and they can become O&M, operations and maintenance team for these multiple companies. So this is again a way. Earlier they were only doing contract-based wiring. Now we are going to change that job role and upgrade that job role so that they can earn more now and create aspirational job roles. Now this is happening in the tier 2 cities. So we have plans for rural cities, we have plans for tier 2 cities, we have plans for some other cities. Now any money which is relief money which is going to be there, either it goes directly into the hand of workforce, which is fine, because earlier, and I think a couple of months back or 1 month back, that was the priority. We also distributed a lot of essential kits and food and sanitization kits. That was the immediate response. Now, if we see things stabilizing quickly, we have to start diverting some of that money towards creation of new livelihoods. How quickly we can create the livelihoods, how quickly we can associate the workers and the work, how quickly we can start making them work and paying them for the value addition that they do. So this is going to be the priority.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. I totally agree with what you have said, and it was an honor to get my question answered by you. Now, due to shortage of time, we are not able to address all of the questions over here. However, I would like to thank each and every guest who have attended this session for sending their questions. Now, I would like to invite our director, SP Tripathi sir of Jagran Institute of Management and Mass Communication to present an e-token of certification to our Pavas sir.
Thank you.
जी मिस्टर नमस्कार।
नमस्कार नमस्कार।
हम जागरण इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ मैनेजमेंट एंड मास कम्युनिकेशन की तरफ से आज आपको ये सर्टिफिकेट आज के सेमिनार के संदर्भ में देना चाहेंगे। अनुरोध है कि इसे कृपापूर्वक स्वीकार करने की कृपा करें।
धन्यवाद धन्यवाद।
जी 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 मिश्रा जी, आज आपने जिस ज्वलंत विषय को आया उससे पूरा देश व्यथित और चिंतित है। कोरोना वायरस से जीवन रक्षा जितनी जरूरी है उतनी ही जरूरी है जीवन यापन के लिए सम्मानजनक आर्थिक गतिविधियां। लॉकडाउन के बीच प्रवासी मजदूरों, खासकर कंस्ट्रक्शन वर्कर्स और MSME में तमाम कामगारों बढ़ती बेरोजगारी और उन पलायन पर सभी जिम्मेदार लोगों ने अपनी अपनी पसंद का राजनीतिक तो बहुत चढ़ाया, लेकिन इस धूप में कई पथरीली राहों पर चलते मासूम बच्चों, महिलाओं और वृद्धों के दुख दर्द की कोई जुबानी चिंता ही की। राजनीतिक आरोप में प्रवासी मजदूर महज वोटर ID बनकर रह गए। देश भूला नहीं है कि गाजियाबाद बॉर्डर पर आनंद विहार में कैसे हजारों प्रवासी मजदूर देखते ही देखते इकट्ठा हो गए। यही मुंबई के बांद्रा स्टेशन के पास हुआ और गुजरात के सूरत में भी। दरअसल मजबूर प्रवासी मजदूर कोई 5-7 की समस्या नहीं है, ये समस्या बहुत पुरानी है। तो ये भी सही है कि इसका समाधान भी पलक झपके नहीं निकलने वाला। सबसे बड़ा सवाल यही है कि यूपी, बिहार, झारखंड, मध्य प्रदेश, छत्तीसगढ़, राजस्थान, हिमाचल, ओडिशा, पश्चिम बंगाल और आंध्र प्रदेश आदि राज्यों से ये मजदूर रोजगार की तलाश में कब से और क्यों जा रहे हैं। अपने सारे राज्य का जिक्र अपने इस पूरी स्टडी किया और ये बताने की कोशिश की कि इन लोगों के दर्द क्या है। ये राज्य सरकारें अपने इनको रोजगार के अवसर, पर्याप्त अवसर क्यों मुहैया करा सकी। केंद्र में समय समय पर विभिन्न दलों की सरकारें भी प्रवासी मजदूरों को उनके हाल पर क्यों छोड़े रही। इन प्रवासी मजदूरों को मजबूर बनाकर क्यों रखा गया। ये बहुत बड़े सवाल है आज देश के सामने और आपने अपने विश्लेषण में इनका सही ढंग से जो रखा है उससे लोगों को सुनने का मौका मिलेगा। इस समस्या का प्रभाव क्या हो सकता है, इसको भी आपने बहुत विस्तार से बताने की कोशिश की और समाधान कितनी जल्दी होता है इस पर भी आपने अपने विचार रखे। इस समाधान का रोड मैप क्या होगा, ये आप जैसे विशेषज्ञ ही इसे पूरी समग्रता से देश को दे सकते हैं। आपने अपने विश्लेषण में विभिन्न सेक्टर से इन मजबूर प्रवासी मजदूरों, खासकर कंस्ट्रक्शन वर्कर्स और उनके पलायन के संदर्भ में न सिर्फ चुनौतियों बल्कि संभावनाओं, रणनीतियों और प्रोटोकॉल्स को बहुत विस्तार से रेखांकित किया है। उम्मीद है आपके इस विश्लेषण से सभी सरकारों को इस समस्या के निदान में काफी मदद मिलेगी। उम्मीद यह भी है कि संबंधित स्टेक होल्डर्स इसे समझेंगे और प्रवासी मजदूरों को बेहतर अवसर उपलब्ध कराएंगे। केंद्र और राज्य सरकार, इंडस्ट्री और सिविल सोसाइटी ऐसा कर सकी तो आपकी इस स्टडी की ये निसंदेह बहुत ही उपलब्धि होगी। पावस मिश्रा जी, हम एजुकेशन फाउंडेशन और इनके मैनेजमेंट तथा जागरण इंस्टीट्यूट मैनेजमेंट एंड मास कम्युनिकेशन कान के सभी स्टूडेंट्स, फैकल्टी और स्टाफ की ओर से आपका हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करते हैं कि आपने जेआईएमसी के असिस्टेंट डायरेक्टर मिसेस त्रिषा शुक्ला के अनुरोध पर समय निकाला। हम जेआईएमसी के कैंपस के कॉलेज आर्ट्स एंड कॉमर्स प्रिंसिपल डॉक्टर, जागरण इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ मैनेजमेंट के डायरेक्टर डॉक्टर दिव्या गुप्ता और जागरण इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ डिजिटल एनिमेशन के डायरेक्टर श्री अतीक अहमद जी, यहाँ के स्टूडेंट, सभी फैकल्टी और स्टाफ का के प्रति भी आभार व्यक्त करते हैं जिन्होंने वेबिनार में अपनी सहभागिता की। अंत में आपकी रिसर्च ओरिएंटेड इस स्टडी के लिए आपका एक बार पुनः हार्दिक अभिनंदन और आभार। हम उम्मीद करते हैं कि आपकी इस रिसर्च के बेस पर कुछ राज्य सरकारें और केंद्र सरकार ध्यान देंगी और माइग्रेटेड वर्ग को उनको रोजगार दिलाने में, उनको रिहेबिलिट करने में आपकी स्टडी काफी मददगार हुई। आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद पावस मिश्रा जी। धन्यवाद मिश्रा।
Thank you, Pavas. Thank you so much for your valuable insight. Thank you and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.